Hello, you are on channel Real Books, and today we'll talk about how to sing better, and we'll give you 16 strategies your vocal coach won't teach you. And also, we'll give you 16 strategies your vocal coach won't teach you. She's such a talented singer, they all say. I wish I could sing like that, but I can't carry a tune to save my life. We've all had comments like these million times, from those who want more than anything to become great singers themselves, but are trapped by the all too common belief that it's something you're born with, and you either have it or you don't. The truth is, though, that singing is a skill set just like any other, and it can be learned. And while certain rare individuals might naturally sound amazing on their own, and certain other rare individuals might always sound awful no matter what, the vast majority of us will sing terribly when we first try, but then get better by practicing. At least, that's how it should work in theory. Unfortunately, the reality is that many singers practice for years and years without ever improving. What's worse, many of them can't even see it. And this happens not because those people just aren't meant to sing. It happens because they don't know how to practice. So for today's video, our goal is to help you avoid this fate by sharing 16 simple strategies to build an effective practice routine that will vastly improve your singing in a very short time. Now let's begin. Part 1. Finding your style. The first reason mediocre singers stay mediocre is they never really develop their own sense of identity and style. For example, think of the contestants of singing shows like American Idol or The Voice. Towards the end of those competitions, it's fair to say that all finalists meet the standard minimum qualifications of good singers, right? They hit their notes with power, precision and finesse, and seem reasonably confident in themselves while doing so. But let me ask you this. How many of those names do you still remember years after the show? Perhaps none, because the vast majority were easily forgettable despite all the cheers of the crowd and all the praise of the judges. So what were they missing? Well, to find out, let's compare them to the opposite extreme, those musicians you've listened to and loved all your life, many of whom were quite terrible singers by all technical standards. The reason we remember those select few names among the sea of others that have come and gone over the decades is simply because they had their own unique style that no one ever really had before, and possibly no one will ever have again. While all those cliché American Idol singers sounded more like clones produced in a factory. So the real question here is, how does one cultivate style? And in this section of the video, that's exactly what we'll discuss. Starting first with develop a badass attitude. Unlike drummers, bassists and guitarists, when you are a singer, stand up on a stage and open your mouth, there's literally nothing for you to hide behind. When you as a singer stand up on a stage and open your mouth, there's literally nothing for you to hide behind. The audience will know exactly who you are and how you're feeling at any given moment, because they will see it in your eyes, on your face and in your body language, and most importantly, they will feel it in your voice. So if you don't honestly feel with 100% certainty, at least while you're on stage, it won't matter how technically perfect your performance has been up to that point, because all they will remember is the smell you fear and self-doubt. And it will repel them. So the next question then becomes, how do you develop that confidence? Well, while there are many ways to trick yourself into being delusionally self-confident, as we all know from the first few episodes of every American Idol season, delusional self-confidence is even worse than uncertainty. So the much better option is to simply become objectively self-confident by actually getting good at what you're doing. Just remember to keep in mind though, that without confidence as well, everything else is worthless. The next advice is copy your favorite singers, not songs. While it might seem strange to say you can develop your own unique style by copying others, it's absolutely true. Almost every great singer, or any other kind of artist for that matter, found their style in the same way, by copying their heroes. Too often though, people misinterpret this advice, and aspiring singers practice any and all of their favorite songs, rather than restricting themselves to the songs of their favorite singers. And here's why this is a mistake. A huge portion of the best songs in music history are performed by one-hit wonders with a level of talent that is not at all worth imitating. Sure, the songs might be catchy, but we're not learning about songwriting, are we? We're learning about singing. And if you want to learn to sing, you need to copy good singers, not good songs. So here's what you do. Make a list of around 4 to 6 of your favorite singers of all time, not necessarily the ones you respect most. Choose the ones you wish to sound like. So if you're a man, the singers on your list should ideally be all male. Make sense? The third tip is recognize who can be copied and who can't. While I'd like to tell you that you'll eventually be able to imitate all the singers on your list, chances are that your vocal tendencies will only align with maybe half of them, if you're lucky. But that's to be expected, as certain voices are so unique that nobody can copy them. Among male singers, the first name that comes to mind is Robert Plant. Every guy wants to sing Led Zeppelin covers, but they almost always end up sounding terrible. Among female singers, Mariah Carey is a great example. Every girl tries to hit those absurdly high notes, but none of them ever actually do. So every few months, take a step back and evaluate which voices you resonate with and which you don't. If one singer's style doesn't seem to align with your own, cross off that name and replace it with a new one. After doing this a few times, you'll eventually settle on a list with a good mix of voices that suit you well. The fourth one is develop your own voices. Once you've built a solid list of legendary singers, it's time to start borrowing from each of them with the ultimate goal of eventually finding your own style. Assuming you chose some truly legendary singers to learn from, what you'll notice after studying their tendencies is that they'll typically have a mix of about 5 to 6 different voices that they selectively use in different musical contexts. Most singers have only 1 or 2. Examples of such voices might include a screaming metal voice, a soft angelic voice, a breathy pillow talk voice, a smoky sexy voice, and the list goes on and on. Once you've identified the various voices used by each of your favorite singers, the next step is experiment with each of those voices to find out which ones identify you the most. And with 5 to 6 voices from 5 to 6 singers, that's around 30 different voices in total you have to play around with. Over time, you'll notice yourself favoring some of those voices over others, and gradually, you'll start to amass more and more go-to weapons in your singing arsenal. The second part is daily practice techniques. So now that we've covered the big picture, and you understand both the planning phase and the long-term strategy of copying others to find your own style, we will discuss various short-term strategies in your daily singing to make your practice sessions 10 times more effective. Now let's begin. The first one, find a practice spot where no one can hear you. One of the biggest mental roadblocks for a singer attempting to sound good is an unwillingness to sound bad. Whenever you're learning a new song or technique, you're going to do it wrong many times, long before you figure out how to do it right. That's just how it works. The problem is, when you practice in a place where roommates or neighbors can hear you, and you're even the slightest bit self-conscious about them listening, you'll never be able to give 100% of your energy and focus to practicing, because you will be scared of sounding bad. This is especially true when learning to develop power in your voice, and it's probably the main reason why so few of us ever attain the awe-inspiring, wall-shaking volume we all wish for. The mere thought of others laughing while you scream your head off in the next room is too embarrassing for most people to handle. One possible way to handle this problem would be to spend months or years working on your confidence until you no longer care what others think of you. But it's so much easier to just find yourself an isolated spot where you can practice without being heard. So if it's at all possible, do that instead. And when others finally do hear you scream your head off, you definitely won't care anymore because you'll know you sound amazing. The next tip is don't bother with silly warm-up exercises. Just like any other muscle in your body, vocal cords do require a certain warm-up time before they are ready to run at full capacity, which is why I'm sure you've seen vocal coaches on TV leading their singers through various warm-up exercises such as reciting silly sentences or making exaggerated tongue and mouth movements. Perhaps you've even done some of these exercises yourself in the past. And while they might have some value to certain people, they aren't nearly as effective as just singing one of your songs. Because as we've already discussed, every singer has their own unique set of voices, each one requiring its own unique combination of muscle movements. And what better way to warm up for those movements than to simply sing something you normally would, but in a relaxed manner, in a way that minimal vocal strain. So be sure to have 3 or 4 songs such as these in your repertoire and sing 1 or 2 of them at the start of each practice session. Then, once you're feeling good, move on to some of your more challenging songs. The third advice is don't sing over other voices. A huge mistake that wannabe singers always make is to practice by singing along with the original voice they're trying to copy. The problem with this method is that you never really hear yourself, because your voice is always masked by other singers' amazing performance. And it's very easy to fool your brain into believing that the awesome sound you're hearing is coming from your own mouth rather than someone else's. So instead, always make sure that there are no other competing voices when you practice singing. The first time you try it, it will feel horribly uncomfortable because you will finally hear yourself as you actually sound. And you will most likely discover that you aren't nearly as good as you thought. But it's necessary to get good because it will allow you to hear what you're doing wrong so you can fix it. Up next, don't sing a cappella either. On the opposite end, the other common mistake that singers make is to practice a cappella with no accompaniment at all. While it does offer the advantage of exposing every little flaw in your singing, people mistakenly believe that just because it's harder, it will make them better singers. The problem is, without a reference pitch to follow, your notes could drift all over the place and you would never know unless you already have advanced pitch perception, which almost no one actually has. If you actually want to be an a cappella singer, then of course practice that way. However, if you're like 99% of singers who'd rather sing with music, then practice with music. And moving on, play your own accompaniments. So the next obvious question becomes, if I shouldn't sing along with other voices, and I shouldn't sing by a cappella, then how should I practice? Now here's the answer. In a perfect world, you would have a custom mix created for every song you want to practice with the vocals removed, or you would have an entire live band ready to accompany you 24/7. In either scenario, you get the best of both worlds because you also get to hear your voice in isolation so you can fix your weak points. But you also get an accompaniment to follow so you can work on pitch control. However, since neither of these two scenarios are realistic for almost anyone, the next best solution is to simply learn to play your own accompaniments, ideally on either acoustic guitar or piano, as they are the two most versatile instruments for this purpose. While it will definitely require some extra work early on, it will vastly improve both your singing and general musicianship in the long run. And as a nice side benefit, it will earn you much added respect from your fellow musicians as well. Up next, memorize lyrics always, read never. While it might sound absurd to you personally, there are some singers out there who think it's okay to read lyrics off a sheet as they sing. And they could not be more wrong. If you don't dedicate specific time towards memorizing the lyrics without the sheet, you won't ever memorize them as well as you really need to. So before you even begin practicing a new song, you should already have the lyrics and the entire song structure memorized by heart. The entire thing should just naturally flow from your mouth, without you having to think about the actual words. because once that happens, you can dedicate 100% of your mental energy to the delivery, rather than being distracted by trying to remember what line comes next. So, as a good rule of thumb, learn lyrics first, sing lyrics second. The next tip is practice a little bit, but every day. Unlike other musical instruments, which can be practiced 12 hours a day or more if needed, you can really only sing for so long each day before your vocal cords have had enough. For most people, that happens anywhere between 30 minutes and 2 hours, with 1 hour being about average. And when you love singing, that hour goes by quick, doesn't it? So if you really want to get good, the only way to do it is to practice every single day, no matter what. And you must continue to do so for the next few years or so to have any chance of ever being the singer you dream of becoming. And you must do this not only to get good, but to stay good as well. Because even after you've mastered a song, if you don't continue to sing it on a regular basis, your muscle memory will tend to forget things over time. Part 3 is advanced strategies. This is the part where we'll discuss some advanced mid-term strategies and goals that you can selectively focus on for months at a time in your daily practice sessions to get you incrementally closer to reaching your ultimate goal of becoming an all-around great singer. First up, learn to control your breath. One of the most obvious telltale signs of weak singers is their inability to control their breathing. Typical examples of this might include huffing and puffing in between phrases, running out of air towards the end of longer phrases, taking quick catchy breaths in the middle of a phrase. And unless they're singers themselves, most listeners won't even notice these problems, at least not consciously. But they still feel it emotionally, and even if every other aspect of your performance is on point, the overall impression of you will be mediocre at the best. The good news is, you can improve your breath control simply by being conscious of it as you practice, and always attempting to extract the maximum amount of sound from the minimal amount of air in your lungs. And you can even test your abilities with the following exercise. Sing a single steady note at a relatively high volume. Time yourself to see how long you can hold it. Periodically retest and try to improve. And if you really take your singing seriously and want every advantage you can get, it also can't hurt to start or continue going to the gym to improve both your lung capacity and general health. The second tip is sing into a microphone sometimes. The first time people hear a recording their own voice, either singing or talking, they all cringe, thinking the exact same thing. Is that what I sound like? Because in that one moment, they finally realize that the way their voice sounds to them in their own head is entirely different from how it sounds to the rest of the world. So here's why this happens. Normally when you speak, your voice travels in a straight line from your mouth to the listener's ears with minimal sound distortion. However, to reach your ears, the sound must travel around and through your head, causing certain shifts in the frequency balance, resulting in a unique sound that only you will ever hear. And the reason people initially hate hearing the sound of their recorded voice is that it conflicts with their perception of themselves. It's not a worse sound, it's just different, and that's why it bothers us so much. And if you don't sing, then it's not worth worrying about. However, if you do sing, then it's a huge deal if you've never even heard yourself the way others do, right? Luckily, you can solve this problem quite simply by building a mini home studio for yourself and spending at least half of your practice time singing into a microphone, so you can hear yourself as everyone else does and adjust things accordingly. As a huge side benefit of singing into a microphone, you'll also learn microphone technique, which many amateur singers don't even realize is an entirely different skill set from singing acoustically. And if you want lots of people to hear you sing one day, as I assume you do, it makes sense to dedicate most of your time toward learning the skill that will help you accomplish that goal. So practice your microphone usage. The next tip and the last one is learn to hear and match notes. Unlike guitarists to have frets to help him find the right notes, and keyboardists who have keys, singers are one of the few musicians who have nothing to rely on but their own ears. So you would assume then that on average, singers will have the best pitch perception of anyone in the band. Ironically though, the truth is quite the opposite. Typically, next to maybe the drummer, singers often have worse pitch perception of anyone in the band. Play a note on a guitar, ask the singer to sing it, and many of them can't, which is quite embarrassing when you stop and think about it. So, how do we solve this problem? Well, first, as I already recommended earlier for a different reason, learn to play either acoustic guitar or piano. For whatever reason, singers who play instruments typically have much better ears than those who don't. The next thing you can do is dedicate 10 or 15 minutes of your daily practice time specifically toward ear training. Here's what you do. Grab an instrument, play a note, try to match it with your voice, and that's basically it. The more musical instruments you do this with, the better you will get at mentally separating the fundamental note from the instrument's note. Which is why you ideally want to perform this exercise on a digital piano, as you will have a virtually unlimited number of instruments to choose from. Early on, you may be unsure whether you're hitting the right note or not, but the more you practice, the easier it becomes, until eventually you can sing back entire phrases of notes without even thinking. So we hope that our tips will help you sing better. That was all, thanks for watching.